Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. Glory to you, Lord. A leper came to Jesus and kneeling down, begged him and said, "If you wish, you can make me clean." Moved with pity, Jesus stretched out his hand, touched the leper, and said to him, "I do will it, be made clean." The leprosy left him immediately, and he was made clean. Then, warning him sternly, he dismissed the man at once. He said to him, "See that you tell no one anything, but go, show yourself to the priest, and offer for your cleansing what Moses prescribed. That will be proof for him." But the man went away and began to publicize the whole matter. He spread the report far and wide, so that it was impossible for Jesus to enter a town openly. He remained outside in deserted places, and people kept coming to him from everywhere. The Gospel of the Lord. Do you suppose Jesus kept a calendar? When did people start using calendars? That's actually a question, really. I've kind of learned when my calendar is a little more open, which doesn't happen very often, it's like, oh, finally, I get to have an extra 5 minutes to figure out my middle name, and kind of do odds and ends at the desk, or just maybe do nothing for 15 seconds. But I've really learned on those days when the calendar says I have less to do, look out, because any number of things just happen. And I use the example intentionally because I think it fits the readings today. As you know, Debbie was away last week at a conference in Albuquerque, San Antonio, and there were at least 4 calls of people that were looking for healing or inner healing or some kind of work. Well, I guess it's Thursday already, but there were 4 or 5 other calls already this week, in 1 week, and they just want something, and the person talked to the person yesterday and gave them an appointment for next week. And normally the appointment's run a couple weeks ahead because we see a lot of people. Well, isn't there anything sooner? I said, you're not on fire. Your house isn't burning down. Chill. We'll see you next week. 2 funerals came in. I saw 2 married couples this week, only one of whom will be married here. The other one's going to be married in Colombia, etc. And some, I shared this with the staff the other day, instead of looking at the readings now, at least for this season, we're sharing blessings. So everybody's invited to share a blessing. And I guess this isn't what I shared. Maybe it is. Maybe I said this somewhere. But after, there might have been yesterday or the day before, it was a busy day and later appointments. And it got to be dinner time, and I said, I've got to take at least 5 minutes and kind of, do an examination of conscience kind of thing and just kind of see where I've been with the Lord and where the Lord's been with me during the day. And it just reminded me, in all these appointments, they usually come in bunches like that. I mean, there might be a week or 2 where there's not a lot of calls. All of a sudden, there's a dozen in 3 days or a week. And really the blessing or the awareness was that all the people God sent for our pastoral care, all the people that God is entrusting to me, and in many cases Deborah and I, for prayer or healing or pastoral care of one kind or another, our staff, and we really as a parish. A lot of people come here because, well, we are what we are. Now again, that might sound like an awful lot about me, but it really challenges me to have an openness. It's hard to be open. We all have our ways, and we all have our ways of being. We all have our ways of liking. The first reading here from the Hebrews, it's easy to sort of leave that message on the page and say, well, yeah, they shouldn't have done that way back when. But how might we harden our hearts now, waiting things and expecting things to be not open to what's going to happen, but waiting for things to be the way I expect them to be and the way I want them to be? Harden not your hearts as at the rebellion in the days of testing in the desert. There's a whole history and context there. God was trying to get a message to the people. These were Israelites. And God was trying to get a message to them, but their hearts were hardened. In some ways, they were hardened against fear because they were under attack. And if I remember the story correctly, they were being pursued. And so they went to, is it Mount Moriah? And it was really a bit of a plateau of a mountain. And they all gathered there thinking, okay, well, we're safe here because they can't get up here because we're blocking the way. But, so they starved them. They no water, no food. The food ran out, and now they were stuck on the top of a mountain with nowhere to go. I was provoked, God said. I was provoked with that generation. They have always been an erring heart, for they do not know my ways. They closed their hearts. They weren't open to the divine way. The gospel, only coincidentally, is quite similar, or distinctly different, depending on how you look at it. The Israelites were just angry and afraid, and they were God was going to save them and protect them, and they were going to, however that went around in their heads. They didn't want God's way; they wanted their way, and they were going to beat those pesky little pursuers of their vindicators or their persecutors, and it didn't work out. Look how open this leper is. Totally vulnerable. And look how open Jesus is. Jesus didn't have a calendar. He dealt with what was in front of him. Really courageous for this leper. You can just almost palpably feel how deeply he desired, in the anguish of his ailment and his isolation, he wanted to be healed. Now, of course, there's a great contradiction in the reading, because he really expresses what would seem to be great faith. If you wish, if you will it, I know you can make me clean. He's really believing. I don't think he's just trying to manipulate Jesus, Moved with pity. Jesus knew how to read people. He was intuitive. He could see this man's anguish. He could see the reality of his heart. Look how open Jesus is. He simply stretched out his hand, touched the leper. The leper had no business approaching Jesus. Jesus realistically had no business touching the guy. I do will it be made clean. And the reason that miracle worked is because both the leper and Jesus were open. That's a powerful phrase. I do will it. And this is God talking to a rejected leper. I want you clean. I see your desire, and your desire is my desire. I have the power to do it. I will do it. That only happens with openness. Part of the struggle with inner healing is people are very open in their desire to be healed, but they can be very resistant to the process. It's hard to look at or deal with or attend to those things that necessitates their healing in the first place. They just want the healing, but they can be more resistant or less open to the process that will get them to the healing. If this was a prophecy, the first half of the reading would be prophetic. It happens in prophecies often enough that God does give people prophetic words. But often enough, or probably too often, they speak the prophecy of the Lord in the Spirit, but then they always add their own addendum. So most prophecies are part of its prophecy, but a lot of it's just the person adding what they felt like adding. So Jesus warns him sternly. Now this is Mark, the gospel writer. He's creating the direction or purpose of his writing. Jesus warns the guy sternly, don't tell anybody. You say, well, that's odd. How can he not tell anybody? His whole life is literally redeemed. He's liberated. He can go back to his family if he had a family. He's free from his ailment. He was Jewish, so Jesus sends him to the temple, get his certificate of purity, literally, and then he can go on with his life. So on the one hand, how does he not tell such good news? But the way Mark writes it, he went out and told the story openly and spread it broadly, far and wide, so that it made it impossible for Jesus to enter the town openly. That's why Jesus didn't want him to say anything, because it hindered Jesus from doing his purpose and will, to go around freely, relate and interact with people. And this man, for whatever good or bad reason, just couldn't control himself. So Jesus had to stay in out-of-the-way places. I know you're aware that God blesses you. You experience his graces. You experience favors. I think there's such a thing as obeying that favor. And I don't mean that you owe God something back, but you obey that favor in the spirit of the grace in which it was given. You honor it. This person, this leper, so open and vulnerable on the one hand, and yet so less controlled on the other. He didn't honor or obey the favor, the grace, miracle that Jesus gave him. And he really messed up Jesus' schedule, because now Jesus had to stay on the outside. Otherwise, he would have been swarmed by people and probably more quickly reported to the authorities, and then his ministry would have really been messed up. Openness is a stance of the heart. So as it's interesting the way this first reading opened, I guess it's the New Testament, it's Hebrews. The Holy Spirit says, you're up. Half of you are awake, the other half are still getting there. See? Are you ready to hear the Spirit today? Are you ready to obey? Are you open to let God bless you, or bless you with a challenge, and obey the favor and thank God and try not to get in his way so he can continue to bless others? I hope there's something in there that you can ponder. I've only got 2 things on my calendar today. I'll be down at the seminary for a while, and I'm doing my laundry in between, by the way. Little things are important. And then we have the intercessory holy hour this afternoon, and God only knows what else is going to happen. Lord, in the grace of the Spirit, make me open, and when you bless me, let me obey it so I don't get in your way.